Nicholas hasn't been to school in almost a month.
You are obviously very gifted when it comes to working with actors and directing them to really stand out performances. And I guess the first step to a great performance is the right casting. Could you tell me about? I've heard that Hugh Jackman contacted you and he was wanting to work with you. What was it about him that like intrigued you for him to take that role?
The first thing that intrigued me is the way he approached me. I would say I was just starting the process of thinking about the cast, and I received that letter from him. I didn't know him, saying that he knew that I was working on the adaptation of The Son. He knew the play. He saw the father, and he said, "If you're already in conversation with an actor, please forget my letter. But if you're not, I would love to have just 10 minutes to let you know why I should be the one to do this part." And I was really surprised to receive that letter, intrigued and moved, I have to say, for what it means in terms of honesty, courage, humility. And so we met on Zoom. It was like 2 years ago, and I was not planning to make any decision. It was just a regular meeting. But after a few minutes, I stopped the conversation and I offered him the role, not because of something he said, but because of something that I felt about who he is, not only as an actor, but also as a human being. I was talking with this man who was open enough to make me understand why he was as a father and as a son, why he was so connected to that story. He had all the emotions in himself. And I thought it would be the opportunity for him, but also for me to do something as truthful as possible, meaning just to allow himself to be himself in front of the camera or thanks to the camera. So it was a specific journey. It was not about trying to create artificially a character. It was about trying to, explore deep down the connection with the story.
I don't know what's happening to me. I feel like a complete failure.
When shooting a tough emotional scene, as there are many in this film, how do you approach your actors in that moment? How specific are you in your directions, or is it your job as a director in tough emotional scenes to kind of step away and let the actor like take over?
It depends. Every scene has a different process and story. For example, there is at some point in the film there is a gunshot, and for that scene, for example, it was about trying to. I didn't want them to fake anything about it, so I rehearsed a lot that scene with my DOP, but without any actors. I knew it would be just one take and one shot. And when they came, the actors, I just told them that you would be like just a camera rehearsal and that there would be no gunshot at the end of the scene. And I just asked them to do the lines. But I knew that I would give the top for the sound to happen, And so when it happened, when the gunshot happened, it was a real surprise for them. And the terror that you can read on the face is real terror, They were not expecting anything like that to happen. They didn't know it would happen. And so they had to deal with it in real time, and they had to make a decision, and they stood up and they started to run out of frame, and it was their body decision, to deal with that moment. And so this is how we shot that moment, and it was only one take, and we moved on because it was already there, and it was not about trying to repeat and to do it again and to try to fake any kind of surprise terror. It was just trying to experience it once when you were not expecting anything to happen. Sometimes it was like that, and sometimes it was like trying to do 15 takes in order to dig deeper and deeper. So every moment is different.
This is now the second one of your own plays you've adapted for the big screen, and I think this like process of adaptation is a quite fascinating, creative endeavor. And I was wondering, what do you find generally to be like the biggest challenge in adapting a play for the screen, and what was it specifically in the case of The Sun?
I think that, there is no general answers, I would say, to that question. I think that every story requires something specific. It's true that when you think about adapting a play to a film, the first advices you get is always to try to open it up, to try to write new scenes outdoor, to make it feel more cinematic, because of course you don't want just to film a play. It doesn't make sense. It's not challenging. It's not interesting. But it's about trying to find a cinematic language that is required for that specific story. And for The Father, my first film, I didn't follow these advices. I made the decision to stay in few rooms in the apartment because it was connected to the story itself. It was about trying to put the audience in a very specific position, as if you were in the main character's brain, and in order to experience from the inside what it could mean to lose your own bearings. And the whole set, the apartment, was part of this abstract world where you were lost, like in a maze. So it made no sense to write new scenes outdoors, and it would have killed the film, I think. So I stayed in a very restrained world, but it's not because it comes from theater. It's really because it was the story I wanted to tell. For The Sun, there was no need to stay in a room. It was about trying to open it up, but mainly to find the cinematic language. And what matters to me when I started writing that script was really to try to find the very simple way to tell that story. I wanted to be as straightforward and as linear as possible. Most of my plays, they are like labyrinths, like mazes, and I guess this is the way I think. But here, for that story, I wanted to try to dare to be as simple as possible.
Adapting your play, how did that kind of change your view on the material? Did you learn anything about your own play that maybe surprised you about the characters in there when adapting it for the screen?
As soon as you started that work, you have to forget about the play. So it's not a reflecting process about what was the play. It's really a discovery of what could become the film. And for example, in The Sun, there was no, in The Sun, there is, so the father, who is Hugh Jackman, but there is also the father's father, who is Anthony Hopkins. And it was a character that was not in the play. It was a mention of that grandfather, like a ghost everywhere, but it was not like a proper character. And when I started writing the adaptation, it became clear that I really wanted to leave a room for that character. And I had Anthony Hopkins in mind, so it helped to write a scene for him. And strangely, this additional scene became like a pivotal scene in that story. Because so it's about a father trying to help his son, 17 years old, who is going through, let's say, depression. But it's not about the son, it's really about that father. It's about him trying to help. It's about the powerlessness of not knowing what to do anymore to help someone you love. And so it was really told from his perspective, even though it's called The Son. And it's because, to me, he is also, or he's maybe the only son in that story. And at some point, we understand that he is a son in pain, and he was just trying to be the father he never had, or to be a better father than the one he had. And that's why that scene with Anthony Hopkins, this brutal and cruel confrontation between the two, became so central in the storytelling.
Can you tell me a bit about reuniting with Anthony Hopkins, especially after the great success you had with The Father?
After The Father, because of COVID, we didn't see each other in real in person for almost 2 years. And even though we were very connected, we talked a lot together. But so it was an opportunity for us to meet again. And I was happy to have Hugh Jackman and Anthony Hopkins in the same frame. It was important to me. I remember that for Anthony, it was the very first time back on set since COVID. And he was very excited about it. He was supposed to start at like 9 a.m. In that morning. But when I show up, the first one on stage, on set, it was like 5 a.m. Someone came to me and told me, we have a problem. Anthony Hopkins is already here. And I said, what? It's 5 a.m. And so I went to see him and he said, yeah, no, I woke up at 4 and I was like, okay, I want to go, let's go. So he was very, very committed. And, you know, even though it's a small part, as you said, it was the same amount of energy, dedication, commitment, questions. That's a real artist, you know, he's not counting the lines. He's just trying to do something in the moment. It was really impressive.
While The Father was universally acclaimed critically, it seems that The Son is provoking more mixed reactions, and I've heard some critics say that they like lament a lack of realism, I guess, as I would call it. They see a staginess and an artificiality in the film. How would you respond to that?
I'm not supposed to respond to that, but I think that, I mean, there are several layers, but I think it has a lot to do with the topic of the film itself. I know that some people said that, you know, the scene in the hospital is not realistic and no parents would react that way. But that's not true, you know, and you know, I'm here in the US, I'm working with a big national organization about mental health, NAMI, and I'm talking with so many psychiatrists, and they are really supporting the film and saying, you know, it's exactly what we are going through in our job and in our experience. But there is something about denial that, I mean, that's the reason why I wanted to make that film, but there is also denial about the fact that we are in denial. We are talking a lot about mental health issues, like a label, but I think we are not comfortable talking about it, and I think we need to be comfortable talking about it in order to help people, because there's so much ignorance about this topic. And in my experience, that story is very realistic, unfortunately.
You mentioned, or you alluded that this is also for you personally an important subject matter and an important film. I would be interested, and you can of course be as open as you feel like being, what is the personal resonance of that story to you, being a father yourself and also being a son yourself, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think to make a film just to tell your own story, it's not enough. It's really because I felt strongly that many people, you know, could be in that position. There are so many people out there in pain, and so many people as parents sometimes could experience what it could mean not to know what to do anymore. That, to me, making that film was relevant. But it's true that in terms of emotions, you know, I'm very familiar with that story, and it's true that it comes from a personal place. I had children, and so yeah, it's pretty faithful to my experience. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jan. It was great to speak with you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.